I stood in the doorway with Megan's cancer diagnosis in my hands, her last shot at a treatment we could barely afford. My kids, Jake and Sarah, sat at the table, thumbing their phones like none of it mattered. "Help," I said. "It's your mother." Jake snapped. "That's your problem, Dad." Sarah gave the slightest nod without looking up. A month later, Megan was gone. They didn't even come to the funeral. That night I swore their betrayal would cost them everything. I wasn't out for blood, just fairness, and I knew how to get it. Before we go on, hit subscribe and drop a comment about where you're listening from. I stood in Jake's doorway, the medical report crushed in my fist. Megan's diagnosis, stage 4, burned into my mind. The Seattle skyline shimmered beyond his spotless living room's floor-to-ceiling windows, all steel and glass like a showroom for a life I didn't recognize. My son sprawled on a leather couch, scrolling. Sarah, my daughter, perched beside him, adjusting a thin gold bracelet as it caught the light. I had just told them about the treatment, the cost, the tiny chance to save their mother. My voice cracked as I begged, "Help us, please. She's your mom." Jake gave a short laugh without looking up. "Your mess, Dad." "Not mine." Sarah's eyes flicked to me, then dropped back to her phone. She nodded once, silent agreement. I stepped closer, the paper shaking in my hand. "You're her children. She would do anything for you." The words felt heavy and useless, like rocks hitting deep water. The room smelled like Sarah's sharp floral perfume. I let the report fall onto the glass table. It landed with a soft thud, a plea written in ink. Jake pushed it away with one finger like it was junk mail. "You think I'm draining my savings for this? Be serious." His voice was smooth, practiced, the tone of a tech sales manager who sealed deals and broke promises the same way. I turned to Sarah, chest tight. "You haven't said a word. Say something." She stood and moved to the window, heels clicking across the hardwood. "We can't afford it, Dad. You know that." Her voice was soft and cut deeper than Jake's grin. She wouldn't meet my eyes. I'd paid for their colleges, their cars, their trips. I'd worked overtime, skipped vacations, built their futures while Megan cheered them on. And now? They sat in this cold, perfect place acting like I was a stranger. My hands shook. "I gave you everything," I said, my voice rising. "And you can't even—" "Enough." Jake stood, towering over me, suit spotless. "You made your choices. Don't guilt us into fixing them." It felt like a slap. I wanted to scream, to shake them, to make them see Megan's face when she heard the news. But their eyes, cool, distant, told me I'd already lost. I grabbed the report, its edges biting into my palm. It was all I had of her in that instant, a thin page carrying her fate. I moved toward the door, legs heavy. The air felt thick, the room smaller. My hand on the knob, I looked back. Jake was already on his phone. Sarah stared at the window, her reflection sharp against the night. I wanted to say anything to crack their indifference. Nothing came. The door clicked shut behind me, the sound too loud in the quiet hall. I stood there alone with the report still in my hand. Their betrayal wasn't just a wound, it was a promise. They would feel this pain. I didn't know how yet, but I'd make sure of it. My engine hummed as I sat in my old sedan outside Jake's building. The report lay on the passenger seat, its creases catching the streetlights. My hands gripped the wheel until my knuckles went pale. "Jake's your mess," Dad echoed, and Sarah's silent nod hurt worse. The Seattle night pressed against the windows, cold and unforgiving, like the truth I couldn't outrun my kids had left us. Megan was dying, and I was alone. But I'd fight anyway. I shifted into drive and rolled forward, the city smearing past in lights. The car smelled like worn leather, steadying me. Megan was at home asleep, unaware of our kids' refusal. I couldn't tell her. Not yet. She deserved hope even if it was thin. At our small place in the suburbs, the porch light flickered. Inside, Megan's quilt lay over the couch, still warm in memory. I walked past our bedroom, listening to her soft breathing, fragile in the dark. In the kitchen, I called the bank. "I need a loan," I said, voice steady despite the ache. The clerk droned on collateral, income, assets. All I really had was the car and the savings we'd scraped together. Then I called a dealer to sell the sedan. It's old but runs fine, I said, ignoring the sting of letting go of the car we took to Sarah's graduation. By sunrise, I'd arranged to drain our retirement fund. It wasn't enough for the full treatment, but it was a start. My back ached, eyes burned, but I kept going. Megan needed me. At the hospital, the halls smelled like antiseptic. Megan lay in a narrow bed, pale but smiling when she saw me. "You look tired, David," she said. "I'm fine." I forced a grin and took her hand. "We're working it out." Her thin, cool fingers squeezed mine. The gold band on her hand flashed a reminder of the day I slid it on and promised forever. I wanted to tell her about Jake and Sarah, to share the weight, but I couldn't. So I lied. "The kids send their love." She nodded, trusting me. I hated myself for it. Later, the doctor pulled me aside, face grim. "A month, maybe 2, he said. The treatment might buy a little time, but he didn't need to finish. I paid what I could every dollar I'd scraped together. Days, blurred bank lines, hospital runs, late calls with insurance. Megan weakened. Her smiles came less often. I held her hand and told stories from our early years, anything to keep her close. But cancer didn't care. One night the monitor slowed. Her breathing went thin. I clutched her hand, her ring cold against my skin. "Stay with me," I whispered. She didn't hear. The room fell quiet, the flatline steady. She was gone. I didn't cry. Not then. Anger was too sharp. Jake and Sarah hadn't called or come. They left her to die, left me to carry it alone. I slipped her ring into my pocket, its weight a vow. They'd pay not in blood, but with everything they valued. I walked out into the long corridor, each step steady. In my pocket, the ring pressed my leg, a reminder of what I'd lost and what I'd make them lose. Rain tapped the polished wood of Megan's casket, one drop sliding down the edge. I stood alone on the muddy grass of a Seattle cemetery, coat soaked through. The pastor talked about peace and rest. I didn't listen. I stared at the empty chairs under the tent, meant for family. Jake and Sarah never came. No call, no text. The sky felt heavy with grief, but heavier still was the anger knotting in my gut. They abandoned her in life and now in death. The service ended. A shovel scraped dirt in slow, dull beats. I turned away, shoes sinking in the wet ground. The drive home was silent, no radio, just the road. Our house felt hollow without Megan's laugh, her humming. In the living room, I sank into the armchair, worn by the years she sat reading there. A photo album lay on the coffee table, leather cracked. I hadn't opened it in years. The pages creaked. Jake grinning in his first car, a used sedan I worked weekends to buy. Sarah glowing at her wedding, the one we took a second mortgage to help pay for. Each photo was a memory of sacrifice, of love, of the family I thought we'd built. Back then, I was proud. I believed they loved us back. My fingers tightened and creased a page. How did we end up here? I flipped faster, the pictures blurring. Jake's graduation. Sarah's prom. A Christmas where we all laughed, Megan's arms around them. My chest ached, not with sadness, betrayal. They took everything, our money, time, trust, and tossed it aside when we needed them most. I stopped at a picture of the 4 of us smiling at a picnic. My hand froze. Those young, happy faces mocked me now. The album thudded to the floor, pages fanning out. I stood with my breath ragged. "Enough," I said into the dark room, voice steady. "They'll pay." It felt right. Final. I went to the desk and pulled out my phone. Scrolling through contacts, I stopped at names I hadn't touched in years, old coworkers, favors owed, people who knew things. My thumb hovered over one. Bill Carter, a retired investigator I'd worked with decades ago. He'd know where to start, how to dig into Jake's deals and Sarah's debts. I needed information, leverage something to hit them where it hurt. Rain knocked at the window, light bending on the glass. My reflection stared back, older and tired, but with sharper eyes. I dialed. The line rang once, twice. My heart pounded, not with doubt, but with purpose. When it connected, I said nothing at first, listening to the hiss on the line and the possibilities behind it. Whatever came next, I was ready. Rain streaked the cafe window, smudging the view of the Seattle street outside. I sat in a corner booth, cold coffee untouched, fingers tapping a worn notebook. Baristas called orders, chairs scraped, espresso and chatter thick in the air. I checked my watch. Dana Bill's contact from Jake's firm was late. I looked toward the door, then back at my notes. Names, dates, questions. This notebook was my anchor now, my way to pull Jake and Sarah down. The door chimed. Dana slipped in, coat damp, eyes darting. She slid into the booth, clutching her purse. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. "You're here now," I said, keeping even. "Tell me about Jake." She hesitated, then leaned in. "He's been bragging. Deals that don't make sense. Off-book stuff. Thinks nothing can touch him." I opened the notebook and wrote fast. "Who knows? Mostly rumors. His boss might suspect." She twisted a napkin. "If it gets out, he's finished." I nodded, pen steady. His name was his currency. Lose that and he'd collapse. "What else?" She looked away. "He's careless. Emails, calls. I've seen some." I kept my pressure gentle until she gave me names, dates, a trail. When she left, rushing into the rain, I felt a spark. Not joy purpose. Next, I drove to Mark's office, a cramped downtown room stacked with files. Mark, my old lawyer friend, leaned back with his tie loose. "Jake's in it deep," he said, sliding a folder across. "Shaky investments. If regulators sniff around, he's done." "And Sarah?" I asked, flipping my notebook open. Mark smirked. 5 cards, past due. She's living off appearances, PR gigs, parties, but she's sinking. I remembered Sarah years ago, asking for a loan for a startup. I gave it no questions. Now her debts were leverage. "Can we use it?" I asked. Mark's eyes narrowed. "Depends." "What's your play, David?" I didn't answer. Back home, night wrapped the house, the old clock ticking in the other room. I sat at the kitchen table with the notebook open. I drew lines. Jake reputation. Sarah debt. Arrows connected them. A web they spun themselves. For the first time in months, I smiled. This wasn't just anger anymore. It was control. I shut the notebook, slid it in a drawer, and turned the key. The house was quiet, but my mind buzzed. I pulled out an old laptop and opened Jake's firm's site. Names, emails, the chain of command. I started an anonymous message, fingers steady though my heart raced. "You should look into Jake Reed. Check his deals." The cursor blinked. I paused, screen glow hard on my face. Was this enough? Or just the start? The word "start" stared back at me. The laptop lit the kitchen, the only light in the house. My fingers hovered over the keys, the email almost done. Jake Reed. Off-book deals. Check the records. The cursor pulsed like a heartbeat. Megan's ring pressed into my leg from my pocket. I saw her face, pale in that hospital bed, still trusting me even as our kids turned away. Was this too far, hurting them the way they hurt her? My hand trembled. No, they chose this. I hit send. The screen flashed, the message was gone. No turning back. I exhaled and shut the laptop. Sleep didn't come, but I didn't need it. I'd taken the first step. Morning broke gray and sharp. I walked through a downtown park for air and noise to drown out the questions in my head. Joggers passed, dogs pulled leashes, kids chased pigeons. I sat on a damp bench and watched the world keep moving. A radio at a vendor's cart caught my ear. Major firm under scrutiny for irregular transactions. My pulse jumped. Jake's firm. It was starting. Across town in Jake's glass-walled office, he stood stiff with his phone to his ear. "What do you mean, an audit?" he snapped. Who sent that tip? His tie crooked, his confidence slipping. I wasn't there, but I could see it. His panic, his world tilting. Good. Back home, I checked the burner email. A reply pinged. We're looking into it. My fist clenched, a thrill running through me. I did this. Me, the old man they dismissed. I paced the living room, energy I hadn't felt in years buzzing in my chest. A shadow lingered. Fear. What if they traced it? What if I was wrong? In the park, the radio had kept going. No names, but key players are uneasy. I'd stood still, hands in my pockets, listening. At home, I turned on the news. The anchor's voice filled the room. Jake's firm again, more details, regulators involved, reputations on the line. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. This was only step one. My phone buzzed. A text from Mark. Jake's losing it. What did you do? I stared at the screen, thumb hovering. I didn't answer. Instead, I opened the notebook, pages creased and crowded with notes. I flipped to Sarah's name and drew a new arrow. Debts. Exposure. Jake was reeling. Sarah was next. She'd built her life on a stage. Time to pull the curtains. I set the pen down and closed the notebook. The rustle sounded loud in the quiet house. A promise of what was coming. Jake's office felt like a glass cage, the Seattle skyline teasing him through the window. His phone buzzed and skittered across the desk. Sarah calling. He grabbed it, jaw tight. What now? He snapped, tossing a pen that rolled toward a hairline crack in the glass desktop. That crack caught the light. A jagged reminder of the audit just announced, sparked by that anonymous tip. His deals. His name. Everything was unraveling. You messed this up, didn't you? Sarah's voice was sharp over the speaker. Your shady deals are pulling us both down. Me. Jake stood and paced. You're the one bleeding money, Sarah. Someone's watching. Someone knows. I wasn't there, but I knew it. From a busy cafe across town, I sipped bitter coffee and stared at Sarah's newest post, a forced smile at a flashy event. The caption shouted confidence, but I saw the cracks. Mark called earlier, voice low. They're at each other's throats, David. Jake's paranoid. Sarah's a mess. I jotted, Jake, panic. Sarah, mask slipping. The scratch of my pen steadied me. In Sarah's apartment, the air was thick with perfume, but the room was chaos, dresses in piles, wine glasses unwashed. She slammed the door and checked the locks twice. If you hadn't been reckless, she told Jake when he stormed over, we wouldn't be here. Reckless. He ripped a page off a pad and crumpled it. You're drowning in debt, Sarah. This is on you. Their voices clashed, blame ricocheting. Years ago, they fought like this over toys, attention. I stepped in then, soothing, fixing. I believed in them. Now I watched from a distance, their betrayal feeding my resolve. Megan's ring pressed cold against my leg. At the cafe, the clatter and chatter wrapped around me. I scrolled their profiles, Sarah posting too often, Jake suddenly silent. They suspected a traitor, but not me, the old man they wrote off. My coffee went cold. I called Mark. What's new? I asked, voice steady. They're melting down, he said, almost laughing. Sarah's dodging calls. Jake snapping at everyone. You got them good. I smiled, but it was thin. I remembered their little hands in mine, their laughter. Could I have changed this long ago? No. They chose. I wrote another note. Sarah creditors. Push harder. The cafe noise faded as I focused and the next steps clicked into place. Outside, the evening air felt electric. In a shop window, a small crack ran through the glass like the one in Jake's desk, like the fault lines in their lives. I took out my notebook, drew an arrow to Sarah's name and whispered, Your turn. My footsteps echoed as I headed down the block. Rain slicked my coat as I pushed through the revolving door to Mark's office, those echoing steps still in my ears. The place smelled like old coffee and paper. A brass clock ticked on a shelf, counting down the last hours of my kids' old lives. Mark slid a folder across the desk. Sarah's sinking, he said. 3 missed payments collectors closing in. Jake's firm? They're digging. One mistake and he drops. I scanned the documents. Sarah's debts, a second mortgage, designer buys she couldn't cover. Can we use it? I asked, pen ready. Mark leaned back, smirking. If you want humiliation, yes. Tip off the creditors anonymously. They'll swarm. I nodded. The clock ticked louder. Time was slipping, but I had the reins. At the Seattle Public Library, the air smelled like old pages. I took a worn table and dug into legal databases. My fingers flew debt collection, bankruptcy rules. A librarian pushed a cart past me. Need help? She asked. Books on financial disputes, I said. She pointed, and I dove in. Notes piling up. Anonymous complaint, creditor pressure, public heat. Sarah's life was a house of cards. I would blow once and walk away. Back home, night wrapped the house. The clock's tick drifted from the living room. Megan's clock, the one she wound every Sunday. I sat at the kitchen table with a blank page. Could I do this turn Sarah's world to ash as she did to ours? I saw her at 5, paint on her cheeks, giggling with Megan. My throat tightened. Would Megan want this? I pushed the thought aside. She died alone, ignored by the daughter she loved. I wrote to Sarah's creditors. Debts, missed payments, a list of lies. My pen scratched each word another brick in the wall I was building. I paused, the clock steady against the quiet. Was I a monster or a father demanding justice? I didn't know anymore. I sealed the envelope, hands steady. The house was dark and still. I checked the locks, slipped the letter into my coat, and stepped out. The mailbox stood at the corner under a street lamp. I hesitated, the envelope heavy. Megan's ring pressed against me, urging me on. I slid the letter in. The slot snapped shut with a hollow clack. Done. The sound kicked around the empty street like a bell. Glass crunched under Sarah's heel, the shattered mirror throwing back frantic eyes. Her place looked like a storm-hit silk. Dresses tangled on the floor, a wine stain spreading across the rug. The letter from the collectors shook in her hand. Pay now, or face legal action. Her phone buzzed. A collector's voice cut through. We know you're avoiding us, Ms. Reed. She hurled the phone. Her scream was swallowed by the mess. The broken mirror gaped like a wound in her perfect world. Across town, Jake's office was a wreck too. Papers everywhere, tie-tossed. You're telling me they pulled the deal? He barked into the phone, his boss cold on the other end. Because of the audit. This is a setup. He slammed his fist on the desk. The thin crack in the glass spread. He didn't know who tipped regulators, but his world was shrinking and his name was stained. I sat on a park bench in the cool evening, leaves rustling. My phone lit with headlines. Reed's firm faces scrutiny. Major client walks away. Mark's text followed. Sarah's a wreck. Creditors hounding her. I leaned back, the wood creaking. Their pain was my doing, and it felt right sharp and clean. Megan's absence pushed me forward. The ring in my pocket reminded me why. I remembered their silence, the ignored calls as Megan faded. They left her to die. They left me to grieve alone. Now they would taste that emptiness. From the bench, I spotted Sarah, at a distance, big sunglasses, unsteady steps. She passed without seeing me, the mask slipping like that mirror. I almost felt sorry, almost. My notebook lay open. Jake's lost contract, Sarah's public collapse all bleeding the way I planned. A shadow still tugged. Too far? The thought gnawed, but I pushed it away. Justice isn't gentle. I stood and headed home, the park calm against the storm I'd made. My phone rang at the porch. Jake's name glowed. Dad, he said, voice raw. We need to talk. I froze, the phone cold against my ear. He sounded desperate, not defiant. A trick? Or a crack I could widen? I said nothing, breathing slow. I hung up. The click echoed in the quiet house. Whatever he wanted, I'd handle it my way. The click still hung in the air. Jake cut off mid-plea. I sat in the dim room, the silence thick, broken only by the house settling. Megan's ring lay on the coffee table, its gold catching the lamp. I traced it, her last words in my ear. Take care of them, David. Did I fail her by tearing them down? The thought stung, but their betrayal burned hotter. A sharp knock at the door jolted me. Jake and Sarah stood on the porch, shadows under their eyes, polish gone. Jake's suit wrinkled, Sarah's scarf crooked, mascara smeared. Dad, Jake started, voice hoarse. I lost my job. The firm fired me. Sarah's voice shook. They're taking my apartment. The debts. I can't do it. She stepped closer, wringing her hands. We're sorry, Dad. For everything. For Mom. I held still, remembering the ring's weight. Those faces, desperate now, were the same ones that ignored Megan's calls and her funeral. Sorry, I said, voice low and steady. You left her to die alone. Jake flinched. We were wrong, okay? We didn't think... You didn't care, I cut in, my hand tight on the doorframe. Sarah sobbed and reached out. I stepped back. You begged for my help once. I gave it. Every time. When I needed you, you turned away. Dad, please, Sarah whispered. We're family. Family. The word burned. I believed in it once. I shut the door, their voices muffled as the latch caught. My chest hurt, but I didn't move. They would feel what they gave us, every ounce. Later, in a busy downtown cafe, cups clinked and voices hummed. Mark slid into the booth with a folder. They're on their knees, he said, grinning. We can push further. Sue them. Ask for repayment tuition, cars, Sarah's wedding. It's legal, and it'll crush them. I drank my coffee, the bitterness grounding me. The ring pressed against my leg. Megan's voice nudging me on. Do it, I said, signing where Mark pointed. They need to learn. He nodded and gathered the folder. Court's tomorrow. You ready? I didn't answer. I tucked the ring deeper into my pocket. Justice was close. It felt heavy, not sweet. Back home, a text from Mark. Filed. Court tomorrow. I stood at the window, the street dark except for a flickering street lamp. This is for you, Megan, I said, fogging the glass. The light danced in the pane, hard and unyielding, pulling me toward morning. The street lamp's glow stayed with me as I sat in the Seattle courtroom, the bench hard beneath me. The air smelled like polished wood and nerves. The judge's gavel rested in front of him. Across the aisle, Jake and Sarah were small and pale, their lawyer whispering fast. The lawsuit papers in my hand listed every dollar I'd poured into them. College tuition, cars, Sarah's big wedding. I would take it back, along with their pride. The judge cleared his throat and read, Mr. Reed seeks repayment for financial support provided to his children, Jake and Sarah Reed, totaling over $300,000. A murmur rolled through the room. Sarah hid her face. Jake's fists clenched white. Their lawyer argued they had no means, that it was unfair. But Mark built an iron case, bank statements, receipts, years of sacrifice laid bare. The judge called me up. I stood with the document heavy in my hand, voice steady. This isn't just money, I said, looking straight at my children. It's about what they threw away. Their mother died alone because they wouldn't help. I gave them everything. They gave her nothing. The room went still. I lifted the papers. I made their lives possible. And I made their fall. The tip about Jake's deals. The letters to Sarah's creditors. That was me. Gasps rippled. Jake lurched up yelling, You ruined us. Sarah sobbed. The judge hammered the gavel, but I didn't flinch. I saw Megan's hand in that hospital room ring cold, breath gone. You betrayed her, I said, voice clear over their cries. You betrayed us both. Now you pay. The judge ruled in my favor, repayment with interest. Jake's face collapsed. Sarah covered her eyes. I felt no joy, only a hard satisfaction. Justice wasn't warm. It was sharp and final, like the gavel's crack. I walked out with the order folded in my coat, the evening air biting my cheeks. The street was quiet, wind and bare branches. I'd won, but without her, The wind felt hollow. I stopped at the cemetery gate, iron cold in the dusk. Megan's grave waited. I touched the ring in my pocket, its curve familiar, steadying. The hinges creaked as I pushed through, calling me to finish what I started. The gravel crunched as I reached her stone. The sky washed pink with late light. Her name carved in smooth granite felt like a hand reaching out. I knelt, damp grass soaking my knee, and set her ring on the stone, the gold still warm from my pocket. "It's done," I said quietly. "They paid for what they did." The silence held, broken by a distant bird. I told her everything, the suit, their tears, the weight of that room. I made them feel it, Megan, the hurt they gave us. My fingers brushed the stone, cool and solid. I kept my promise, but the cost hung in the air. She loved them, even at the end. Would she have wanted this? I stood as the color drained from the sky and let the question go. The road here was long. Jake's sneer, Sarah's silence, Megan's last breath. I saw us years ago, hand in hand in a park, her laugh bright, her eyes alive. That's the Megan I carry, not the one fading in a hospital bed. I fought for her, for us. It was enough. Back home, the place felt different. Still hers, but lighter. I cleared the coffee table, putting away the album, the notebook, the court papers. Each thing was a chapter closed, a weight set down. The old clock spot was empty now. I didn't need its tick. Time wasn't my enemy anymore. I called Bill, voice steady. "Feel like fishing this weekend?" He laughed, surprised. "You serious, David? It's been years." "Time to start again," I said, and meant it. We picked a day. I hung up with the promise of something new settling inside me. In the living room, I sat with Megan's photo, her smile soft in the lamp glow. I tore down their world not for hate, but for love for her and the life we built. They'll rebuild, or they won't. That's not mine to carry. I switched off the lamp. The room fell into a quiet dark. In bed, I held her picture, breathing slow. Justice was done. I was free, not from sorrow, but from rage. I closed my eyes with her face in my mind and slept, lighter than I had in years.